Hey everyone, for those of you who don't know, my name's Connor. I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the channel, and particularly to those of you who haven't watched any of our videos before, I just wanted to give you a brief breakdown of what we do here. So we produce content on pretty much everything to do with getting your life together in your 20s. Now, Majella and I, the hosts of this channel, actually run a business separate to YouTube called Your Compass, and through that, we help anyone looking to study in Australia break down all of the steps to get them into the course that they dream of, essentially. So regardless of how well you performed in high school, we'll be able to help you find a pathway into whichever degree it is that you would like to study. And not only that, but we provide assistance on scholarships, on early entry, on fees, on loans, and as we're going to talk about today, on accommodation. Now, just to be fully transparent from the outset, I want to mention that this video will accommodate both domestic and international students, and while some may be more suited to others, most of them will be offered regardless of whether you're an Australian citizen or living here in Australia or coming from another country. And before we jump into the first option, regardless of whether you're a domestic or international student, if you do feel as though you want some personalized support choosing the course, choosing the accommodation, or finding the right scholarship for you, go down to our description section and there'll be links for you to find more information. Okay, so accommodation options. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There are varied levels of inclusions, and this ultimately varies the price. What I'll try to do as I list out each category of accommodation is sort of do it in a most expensive to cheapest option. However, with something as varied as accommodation, you may be able to find one of the accommodation options that offers more of the support, more inclusions for cheaper. It really comes down to how much research you're able to do, sort of the popularity of the area that you're going to study in, and a host of other factors. But I'll do my best to, generally speaking, on average, list them out from most expensive to least. And it isn't always a matter of the least expensive one is the one to go with. You may find that throughout your study, you may want to start with one of the more expensive options because of the inclusions, and then ultimately, once they become less and less valuable, switch to one of the cheaper accommodation options to save yourself some money. So there's definitely not a hard and fast, this one is better than this one. It all depends on what your specific needs are and ultimately what's available at the university that you're going to. So starting off, we have on-campus college accommodation. Now, like I said, if you were to go with one of these college style, dorm style accommodation options, you are probably going to pay a pretty penny, but that isn't necessarily ripping you off. These options do actually have a lot of inclusions. Things like having ideal locations. A lot of the time, these college accommodations are located in the middle of the university campus, owned and operated by the university themselves. They also include things like printing services, tutoring, organized events, catering options, and a host of other things. And while you may have your own room with a bed, desk, and a bathroom, usually these accommodation types will have communal eating areas, but the prime location and the support that's involved in these sort of accommodation options are really good to not only help you along with your studies, help you get used to the university, but also to meet friends. As I said, in some cases, these accommodation options will have organized activities, and you may have a head of the house or a head of that wing of the dorm that will check in with you, make sure that you're coping, and also help you make friends at the university. With this sort of accommodation, usually the minimum amount of time you need to commit to something like this is a term, and assuming you're not going to break the bank, this is usually a pretty good option for your first semester. As I said, you're going to be located directly in the middle of campus, so you're not going to have to worry about also figuring out public transport or getting a vehicle in order to get from your accommodation to class when you're not really familiar with your timetable, when you're a bit all over the place. So actually living on campus and being only walking distance from all of your classes is a huge advantage. Not to mention the fact that you're going to be surrounded by people in your exact situation. So if you've moved far away from all of your family and friends, you won't be completely isolated. And this can give you a really sort of movie-like university experience. The next accommodation on the list may not be offered by every university, but it is something to consider if living near to the university is really important to you, but you don't have enough money for those fully supported college experiences. There is no real name for these sorts of things, but the essence of the accommodation is a share house owned and organized by the university. So like the colleges, the university may offer this other accommodation option on their website that offers the students more autonomy with a lower price point. Usually what's involved in this is the university owning entire houses, multiple room houses, and selling out the individual rooms to students of the university. These properties are usually located outside of the university gates, but in adjacent streets, sometimes within a 2-minute walk of the actual campus itself. And rather than having the catering options, the tutoring, and all of those additional inclusions, it's simply a house located close to the university with a communal kitchen and individual rooms, and the students will go about getting that real share house experience, but with some additional comforts, that being living really close to the university and having them as your landlord. The next accommodation option, and slightly cheaper on average, would be to look at third-party student accommodation sites. Now, there are a number of these businesses out there. One example that you may want to have a look into is Amber Student. The style of accommodation itself is actually very similar to the previous one we spoke about. However, the difference is, in this case, the university isn't facilitating the accommodation. It's this third party, Amber, who will be doing that for you. Now, obviously, the benefits of using something like Amber versus the university is that there are many more options available, as they provide accommodation near almost every university in Australia. So you're usually, if price is an important thing to you, you're usually able to find that cheaper option through their website, purely because there are more options to choose from, and that puts the power back in your hands. Basically, all you would do would be go onto their website, type in the university that you're going to attend, and there you go. Any properties that they have in the vicinity of that university will now pop up, and you have the option to choose which one suits you best. The next accommodation option we have on this list is just simply going out and finding a place to rent on the open market. Now, obviously, if you were to go to realestate.com or domain.com and look for different houses that are available to rent, it would be pretty difficult if you were planning to live there on your own to find something cheaper than the options that we mentioned. Perhaps you would be able to find something cheaper than the very first full college dorm experience. The other ones, you'd probably be better off in terms of price, because you're not paying for an entire apartment, an entire house, you're just renting one room. However, the reason I'm mentioning it at this position in the list is because of the ability to create your own share house. Now, this is actually something that I personally did when I was attending university. The first option, which has its own pros and cons, would be to go on a social platform, something like flatmates.com or even Facebook Marketplace, and look for rooms available in existing share houses. Now, usually the process would be like, you find a listing, there's photos and a bit of information about the property itself, including what you would get as your share and the price. You would go and have an inspection, talk to the current housemates, and see whether or not it's a good fit. Obviously, with this sort of thing, you're moving in with strangers in a lot of cases, so this may or may not be something that you're comfortable with. I personally haven't had any really horrible experiences, and most of the people I know who have done this sort of thing have found it overall to be a good thing, but for some people it just isn't the best. So the next option would be to link up with other people looking for a share house and go into a new property with all of you on the lease directly. Now, you can do this either with existing friends or classmates that you know and you're comfortable with. However, for some of you who are new to the area, who may be just starting their degree and don't know anyone who may want to move into a share house with you, there are options for that sort of thing on websites like flatmates.com and on Facebook Facebook Marketplace, where you basically seek out other people who want to rent out an individual room, and you team up, find a property yourself, and start the share house anew. So that's something that you could consider. The last one, which is the riskiest, you could say, but is something that people have done, is to go into a property yourself. Now, this would only really work if you have a high enough income to be completely comfortable with covering the rent should you be left with no other housemates. But you would basically go and find a property that you feel would work good as a share house. You sign on as the main responsible tenant, and then you find appropriate people to move in as your subtenants, and it's usually done through a lease that you have to notify the landlord of. But that would basically give you a little bit more control over the property that you find and over organizing the tenants that you allow in if you're the one facilitating it. And lastly, we have good old parents and relatives. Now, I know, before you freak out, this is definitely not an option to everyone, particularly if you're an international student. But there are some people that I know who go to university in their hometown and feel like it's part of the initiation, part of the university experience to move out for that process. And while I will admit that I personally moved out at the age of 17, it wasn't to live in my hometown. I was moving interstate. But I will say that the process of moving out was probably one of the best things I could have done at that time. However, there are some people out there who could use the additional support, the additional time to settle into university life without the additional pressures of searching for accommodation and paying rent. So if you're currently living close to the university, or you have relatives who are living close to the university, it may be worthwhile to ask them, am I able to stay for at least a semester, just while I get used to university life? You could even offer to increase what you do around the house, or help with some of the groceries in terms of paying for those, or the housework, in order to give some indication of your gratitude for them allowing you to live there. But not considering it at all would be a mistake. And again, before you get the wrong idea, I do believe that moving out is an incredible step, and definitely something that should be done around that post-school university age. So it's definitely not something that I would recommend you do for the entirety of your degree, but at least for the first semester or year, it could be something to consider if you're wanting to save a bit of money. But I'll echo what I said at the beginning of the video. There is no perfect answer. There's no objective right or wrong for which accommodation is the best. It all depends on your specific circumstances. So I hope this video has given you a few things to think about. Like I said, Majella and I offer one-on-one support. So if anyone out there is feeling a little overwhelmed or a little confused, or just wanting a second set of eyes to have a look at their application or what their plan is overall, just go to the links in the description and we would be more than happy to assist. Otherwise, if you have any questions, pop them down in the comment section below. We get to every single comment, and I'll see you in the next one.